Jesus in his corner
Could be.
on his windowsill?
Looks like a Mary.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a Mary.
Okay, we're
I did have I did have a procedural question, but
Okay. Are we on
um,
now?
We are.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
sometimes
yeah.
the select board goes into executive sessions, which is not live streamed. Is that correct, Allison?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So Tom had asked some questions, Tom Zumwalt, in email, and I'd like to respond to those, but I'd like to do it in an executive session.
Oh, I don't think we can call executive session.
Why not?
We would have to notify, we would have to check with just the town in general, but the rules for the select board are very clear. You have to give notice, you have to state a reason.
It's
It
state
has to be one
statute.
of the reasons. So, the public and the media have to be notified that we would be doing it.
Oh,
And it goes according to state statute. And what's so important that we need to go into executive session?
I don't know what email we're talking about.
Yeah,
I
we didn't.
I didn't see an email either. So
Tom
you
wants to discuss the possibility of a trail through the Midco solid waste.
But why would that be executive session?
The reason it needs to be is an executive session is that it's a little bit sensitive for the town of
It's
Camden.
really not. We have brought that out in the open. I've brought it up at meetings of Midco Solid Waste. I bring it up occasionally in the Camden Select Board. It's actually, that's great. I would love to talk to Tom about that. I have a whole folder of all your past stuff, really, Jeff. That we could do.
So
Listen,
the
you
issue,
guys-
the issue of the catch basin is totally out there.
Oh,
But-
the stormwater thing.
But
That's
let's put that on the
Yeah.
agenda for a meeting. And have
Okay,
Tom and just so that other people who might be interested, because it's a great topic, but let people know instead of us diving into it now. I mean, we sent the agenda.
right. No, I totally get it, Linda. It relates to he submitted that he wanted to put it in the master plan.
Right, I think I remember that. Did you? Okay, so let's just follow the agenda first before we get going on that, because that's on the agenda, the master plan. So shall we start then with the agenda? Unless anybody's got adjustments to the agenda. Not hearing any. Let's dive into the Route 1 North, which I know, Allison, you got an update from Audra last night. And a couple of weeks ago, I had gotten in touch with the DOT because I was curious as to because I saw the RFP for bids for cutting the vegetation. So that's coming up. I don't know if you all had a chance to read that quick article that I did, but last night, I think what Audra said that it would be within a year, right, Allison, for the
It's being broken up into two parts with the bridge separate from the rest of it. And one part of it has to go back out to bid, is what I understood, which was a little confusing to me. And I meant to circle back on that, but because I thought it was all ready to go. Maybe it's just the bridge part that's. I thought they
the
were doing
bridge is
bridge
being
first.
separated. The Springbrook Hill Bridge is being separated from the Route 1 resurfacing rebuild.
Mhm.
But it always was separate. So
Right.
maybe that's two separate bids,
Mhm.
one for the rebuild of the road and one for the rebuild of the bridge itself. Anyhow, it's coming fast because they are going to start cutting vegetation this fall.
Mhm.
Not that that has a lot to do with us, but what does have to do with us is the getting in touch and talking about striping, which came up in our conversation with Margot and my conversation with John and Orion in Rockport, but Margot's going to report on that one. Anyhow, to go back to Route 1 North, now is our chance to jump in and see if we can influence any striping up there. for next year.
Just an FYI, I put a link to minutes in the chat. And I'm happy, I will do my best. It would be great if anybody wants to add things. So I hear striping.
Yep. I think we should make the best effort to see if we can at least get in touch. And I don't know. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. And I think I spoke to Dave Saint Laurent and about that. And I think he said, go talk to the DOT about it, like, because it's the DOT project. So shall we make a concerted effort to at least talk to the DOT and say, is there any, can you tell us what you're doing for striping, and open the conversation?
Wouldn't hurt. I have two things. One, Linda, is I don't see this on the agenda. All I saw was master plans.
Well, no, wait,
Last I got was an email from you that said, here's an article about a person in a wheelchair getting hit. And
Oh,
then
look at the top of that, because that was like it was attached. And this is
It was-
where Google is weird. I mean, Gmail is weird, but it should be in the top, because I was like, what's the email? And then I realized, oh, I mean, what's the Zoom address? And I
Right.
knew it's in the agenda.
okay, got it.
Okay.
Thank you. The second one is, I was hoping in that, Margot, what you were just alluding to, that there was a link to any updated plans related to this project, because the last plans that we saw by the MDOT had striping included. They indicated the striping on the plans. So
There are
think-
plans.
Do you think that those have been removed?
No. In fact,
But it doesn't
while-
hurt to say, hey, we're just checking. We're making sure that this stripe on here, or this line on here, is what you're actually going to be doing.
So here's what I'm going to do, Jeff. I'm going to go to the DOT website right while we're talking. I'm going to get the link. And while we're talking, the conversation can continue, but you could take a quick look, because it's really hard to tell what the striping exactly is on these plans,
Yeah.
but maybe you have a better acquaintance with reading these DOT plans. So I'll do that right
Maybe,
this
I don't
second.
know. But again, I think your point is it doesn't hurt to raise the question. And then there's also this, maybe the policy has changed by DOT about their pushback on why they don't want to put a bicycle symbol in that lane. And their pushback was because it was dual purpose, bicycles and pedestrians. And so they didn't want to put a bicycle only picture. But maybe they've gotten past that at the DOT and they now have a dual logo, or maybe I don't know. All around the rest of the world, they do it.
What, can you send a picture of around the world what they do? Because that would be something just to talk
And
about
that's
it.
actually will be congruent with that common language between Camden and Rockport, which we've discovered is a bigger kind of piece to work cooperatively between the two towns, is what are these common language. So when we say Sharrow, that's key. So just to capture this, striping, the DOT had a plan in there. And I guess the question is, if we find that it feels like it communicates well, are we feeling like that is the best we can do with what their striping plan is? Or do we want to, before, because we certainly can't influence anything else about that Route 1 North build, is there something we want to put in that could influence the striping or the signage, that whatever they're going to paint, the painting of whatever they do? And it may be a mix, whether it's Sharrows, whether it's, what the fog lines are going to look like. Or I've even thought, and Jeff, you might be proud, I'm now a bike commuter.
Ooh, whoa.
I've even thought that having whatever those ripple lines instead of fog lines, you know, could be a way to protect bicyclists if there's a wide enough shoulder. Because if
Right,
somebody
that's the
kind of
key.
drifted into that area, then at least they
Yeah.
like, you know, be alerted that they're drifting. But, you know, so what to me, it seems like the question is, are we okay with whatever the plan is? Because we can't influence the asphalt and the, you know, whatever they're doing, but we can influence the painting. Possibly.
Yeah, I would be in favor of trying to push it again. It's been a year since I contacted BCM, or more, probably 18 months, no, probably 2 years, about trying to ask them to push forward this idea of a dual logo where it has both pedestrian and bicycle symbol. And I don't know what the status is, whether they just shelved it or what, but it would be good. And I'd be happy to contact BCM to start the conversation and see whether that gains any traction there. And if it doesn't, then I'll contact our DOT area engineer guy and say, hey, just checking in. We're making sure that this particular aspect of the plan is still moving forward. The aspect being painting the fog line. I just can't imagine it wouldn't be.
Allison?
So my memory was that I think they're probably still painting the fog line. That I agree with you, Jeff. I can't imagine that wouldn't be. But one thing that has changed since the last time we were discussing this and trying to get them to do something different in the, you know, the shoulder area with painting is that Dakota Hewlett was hired as the active transportation planner for MDOT. And I sent a link in the chat here, and he's, you know, helped develop their first ever plan that's supposed to be incorporating bikes and pedestrians and all of this stuff more than ever. And it might, if we were even, rather than like completely prescribing a solution, having somebody reach out to him and say, hey, you weren't here when we were doing this project. What do you see as the best? What can be done in the shoulder to, you know, increase safety? And, you know, see if there's something that he could do to insert himself, because he seems to be a real expert and enthusiast in this. And
yeah, you know, and I was, we were in those conversations initially in those transportation plans that were being facilitated by BCM. So we were in there swinging on that one, advocating. So great contact. I'll start with him. But I'll also go to BCM too, because I just will.
oh yeah,
Allison, who's Dakota again?
Dakota Hewlett is the active transportation planner for MDOT. And if you look in I included just a quick link to a news article about how he's kind of supposed to be a glimmer of hope for cyclists and pedestrians in, you know, Maine's transportation planning. And I think Dave St. Laurent said that he talked to him about something at one point and was like, whoa, you know, he seemed to be really.
Hey, it sounds like he's a
enthusiastic about
person
this
we
stuff.
need to meet. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's his job to try to influence DOT projects to be safer for pedestrians and cyclists. So maybe just asking him if he's reviewed the plan or.
Thanks. That's a great idea.
I'm still going back in time. It's because the RFP is down because the deadline, I can't get the plans as we're talking, but because it goes back.
Linda, I do have a copy of those plans from ages ago, but I just
Yeah,
don't.
but are they ages ago still?
They're ages ago.
Yeah. Anyhow, I'll do a little bit more sleuthing, and if I can dig up a more recent, if it comes up. Otherwise, Paul Merrill, he's the one who sent me information. But that he's a spokesperson, so I don't know. Anyhow, and
So can I just get a sense of what are our action steps? Like what's Jeff doing? What's I heard Jeff's doing something, Linda's doing something, but I'm not sure what they are.
My plan, if it's okay with the committee, is to, I'll start with Dave St. Laurent, and just make sure he's in the loop. And then I will, based on that conversation, I will contact BCM, and then I'll also contact Dakota. And if Dave recommends that I talk to our regional DOT person, I'll talk to him too. And yeah, there's two things going on here. One is the project northbound and the striping, but there's also the underlying effort, which is to try to get this logo, this symbol approved for in those situations where there's both pedestrians and bicyclists.
And that's great, because that's really important for the next topic, which Margot's gonna recap, but that was a synthesis of the need for a synthesis of symbols and what we want to do, whether it's Park Street, Meadow Street, Park Street, Camden, Meadow Street, Rockport, or any other roads, and for the state too. And so that drivers and pedestrians and bicyclists are all on the same page. Margot, did you drop out?
No? Did
Oh,
I?
okay. Yeah.
So Linda, you need to
Oh.
summarize what you're gonna do.
I'm digging up the plan for you. Because
Okay.
we don't need a bunch of people talking to the DOT. I think
No, I think that was it,
bottom-
Margot. She's
the
just
bottom
looking.
line, from my perspective, is I'm going to try to dig up the plans for, oh, here we go. There it is. Springbrook Hill Bridge. And that is that.
Their
Oh,
link
just
is gonna-
posted, that RFP was posted today, and the bid date is 10/11. So that's the bridge project itself. That's a brand new RFP for rebuilding Springbrook. So sorry, back to, I'm going to try to dig up the plans and email them to you, or email you the link, Jeff, so that you can look at them and you're all wiser for when you get in touch with the DOT to talk
And
about.
I'll try to post those plans up to Google Docs. They are typically humongous data files.
Or the link, or just post the link, because they're already at the DOT website.
Okay, fair enough.
So I put down at action items, Linda is gonna dig up current plan of DOT and email the link to Jeff. Jeff, you're gonna contact Dave St. Laurent, you're gonna contact BCM, you're gonna contact Dakota Hewitt to focus on the project north of Camden, and also to focus on a logo that works for both pedestrians and bicyclists.
Well, I'm not right. Just some kind of symbol. I'm not going to develop it, and I don't think it's our
No,
role to develop
But
these
that
kind of universal
conversation with
symbols.
them is to
Yeah.
focus on something that can be multi-purpose.
That's right.
So this plan for Springbrook Hill, at any rate, is still 2021. So it doesn't look like it's changed dramatically from 2 years ago. But anyhow, I'm going to put that in chat and I'll email it to you, Jeff. That's just Springbrook Hill. It's not Route
Yeah,
1, but I'll dig up
yeah.
those too.
That
Okay.
I bet it hasn't changed. So
Things move slow.
Yeah, but see, it was interesting because, it's almost doubled. The price of both projects are almost doubled in price. And in 2015, because that's when it was first introduced, the DOT said, no, we've got the money, we're ready to go. And then they didn't have the money. And now I think it's ARPA funds. They do have the money. So for some reason, the money,
Oh,
yeah, that's why nothing happened till 2023. So somebody's seizing the day over there at the DOT. Okay. So shall we go on to the next agenda item? Everybody's happy with that? Okay.
good.
Okay, so the next one is, Margot's going to recap. Like I said, she and I met with John and Orion last week for a good long time, and chatted about a bunch of stuff. So all yours, Margot, I'm giving you the floor.
So it's a little bit sporadic, but the bottom line is John and Orion have a definite commitment to wanting to make sure, and I will tell you, I can't speak and take notes at the same time, so
I will,
Then-
I'll do it. Yeah,
Okay.
I got it.
you there? Okay. And what the commitment is this desire to want to be, like, as they move forward, is having pathways in the mix. I think what's happened in the past is we haven't really understood and sort of interjected at the way Rockport's kind of fiscal plan plays out. So we know that now. We know that it is really critical that if we have a capital sort of thing that happens, it has to take place, like we have to engage with them before the end of September. So we know that there's really two critical time periods in the year that we engage with them. But there's also this awareness that the other departments have to have this mindset. And so it may require some more meetings, but more with departments as opposed to how the town process works. And so committees have a 12-month work plan. Their budgets are due November 1st. And that's, so we know that anything that we want from Pathways kinds of has to already be laid out before November 1st. That's with budget requests, Pathways priorities. It means we probably have to do some things ahead of that November 1st. But by then, if it doesn't go into that November 1st workaround, then it's not going to make it into that budget year. But as we've seen in the last couple of years, you get these sort of pockets of money. They want to know how to build that sort of total awareness that when certain roads go in, like I would say from my perspective, John owned that Park Street was a little bit, because money all of a sudden came up. They knew it was so bad. They had to do something. It was so quick, but they also realized it wasn't responsive to the needs of that road. And that road being that it's heavily used by bikers and whatnot. And that even the way that they've addressed it in the last 12 months, which you'll see when you guys get back, the way they've addressed it, like even in the second sort of iteration, may not be addressing the needs of pedestrians and bicyclists. They don't want that to happen again. So we need to figure out in their sort of cycle how this works. And when I say their cycle, it's really our cycle, but we have a much better sense of how the Rockport cycle of sort of planning and budgeting and then follow through, which are kind of the three pinnacles, happen. So we have to know that we, as a Pathways, a two-town Pathways committee, there's two meetings that we need to make sure that we engage with between the two towns. There's the other parts of the year that it probably is really important for the Rockport Pathways to be doing some groundwork, and Camden might be doing some groundwork, and there may not need to be this like constant Camden Rockport, but that there are times where it's going to be super critical where there's any kind of infrastructure that we're talking about that goes between the two towns. Like, for instance, the beautiful pathway, which is being used constantly, which is that Route 1 pathway that goes from, Quarry Hill over to a little bit beyond the hotel there.
Biscuits.
Yeah, that pathway in some ways was built and they will come. There's no question that has become like vital infrastructure. Rockport has paid attention to that. And the question becomes, there's this little bit of like, build it and they will come, and this planning that has to happen. And so, Rockport's wanting some direction, and I felt, and Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, I felt very much like they were asking, like, here's our cycle of making decisions. And granted, people change. And what they wanted was to know, here are the leverage points. We need to make sure that you are completely prepared at these leverage points. And there were 2 leverage points they talked about. One was right before that budget cycle. And the second was probably sometime in May, June, when the actual implementation of all the budget projects start to happen. And to make sure that what we were talking about is actually happening. And so those were kind of the 2 big pieces. Capital plans actually are due a little bit early, and we can write up like where these need to happen for a Rockport plan, but we know that they're really working on a much more calendar base as opposed to a responsive base. So we know that end of September, we need to have any capital plans. By the beginning of November, we need to have any sort of 12-month work plan. And then in May, June is when we check in to make sure things are being implemented the way we believe they were supposed to happen.
Margot, you just said we need to have, is we pathways?
And that is the question of whether it's the Rockport pathways or it's the we pathways.
No, that wasn't my question. We don't have a budget. We don't have any money.
No,
in pathways.
it's what pathways is requesting within the budget process.
We put in our request.
So
they
you're-
incorporated
so-
in the budget.
So there's 2 ways I'm trying to grasp. One is influencing other committees that have budgets, town committees, town offices that are putting together their budget. That's influencing them. The other one is to say, we want $2 million to build this sidewalk in Pathways Committee, and we want that money.
Correct. So the first one that you said about influencing other budgets, that's kind of capital planning. And we have a time that has to happen by the end of September. The second part is within that budget cycle that we need so much towards a certain project, and that's our November 1 deadline. So both you're absolutely right picking up on that we have to understand the Rockport process, and I feel hopeful that this process will be in place for the next 5 to 10 years. Because I do think that both Orion and John are sort of committed to Rockport for this chunk of time, which means this will probably be the cycling through of how things will happen.
Except for this particular cycle, the Main Street sidewalk is going to go in. And I go, oh, well, Helen's going to be happy.
And that's simply because a fund of money and they got to choose where it went.
That's right. That's right. But going forward, there's going to be a better dialogue.
So the requests for the coming fiscal year need to be made and agreed to and made by the Pathways Committee this meeting.
It's too late.
Yeah.
Because there's no other meeting before the end of September. And then in the next meeting, the next step has to be planned and decided on before the beginning of November.
That's true. I think there's 2 things about that point. Number one is we will share not only with, we've shared with them, but we will share with the other committees that it's relevant to, the master plan. which we'll look at later. But number two is it may actually mean that they can be more responsive as opposed to just kicking the bucket down the road, which has kind of been what's been happening in Rockport. Like new town manager comes in and they just kick the project down the road because it's, it's not imminent. And so knowing this cycle may be helpful to us to expedite things. But we also know how to engage with the other departments so that it becomes a little higher priority. And part of that's going to be politicking on Rockport's part. And when I say
So,
politicking, I mean engaging with those department heads as well as attending some select board meetings.
sure, got it. And what I'm balancing in my brain is which has got a better chance when being reviewed by the budget committee. The Pathways Committee says, we want $25,000 to build this section of sidewalk. Or Public Works says, we need $2.5 million for infrastructure work. Included in that is $25,000 of sidewalk work.
Didn't you just answer your own question?
No, I'm asking which is better? Which is better? Which is a more strategic way to approach that question?
Linda, correct me if I'm wrong.
Or is it both? Is it we're asking for $25,000 and Public Works asked for $25,000, which doesn't seem right because that's redundant.
So Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say the scenario where if Public Works is asking for it, it will have more clout.
Yeah,
But if Pathways has laid the groundwork as to why, that $25,000 may not be as questioned if it's coming from two fronts. It wouldn't be redundant. It would be that there's two entities that are asking for it.
It's
right.
reinforced.
That's why when Public Works includes things, they ask us to be present at the budget meeting to defend that. And I think that's a knock it out of the park strategy. But I don't understand when you were drawing your calendar suggestion that this committee, the Pathways Committee, the Rockport, the Camden Pathways Committee, put forward their own budget.
No,
No,
no, it's spending. So say we want to get Park Street painted. So we would say, hey, would you please put this in Public Works budget?
Sure.
Or would you please spend this to get Park Street painted?
Correct.
On the other hand, we may say that, we need to continue this and, we're quoted that it's going to cost X number of dollars. We don't have that same understanding of budgeting through Pathways, but we do know that from this point to this point needs to happen. And this is what we're defending.
Let me tease this out just a little bit more. In your meetings with John and Orion, were they suggesting the Pathways Committee develop a budget?
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's just our request. It's like the master plan.
It's the same.
But it's wanting us to understand their cycle and wanting to make sure that there's this cross pollination, this cross.
Absolutely.
And that whatever requests we have are fitting into their cycle.
Perfect. Got it. Thank you.
Anything that I should add, Linda?
I think there was progression, just general progression on the Route 1 pathways.
Oh, yeah, and actually, just the
Route 90,
highlight,
sorry, Route 90.
October for Rockport is an absolutely key month. Like, if the conversation about something that needs to happen doesn't get sort of indemnified in October, then probably we have to wait a whole year. So October is a very key month.
So to Anita's question, do we want to take action now for October? This is the last meeting before October.
So that's a good segue.
So
Linda,
wait.
what did you say they were saying about 90?
Yeah, so Route 90, which is being very much encouraged, the planning being very much encouraged for a pathway out there. And that the report from, what's the name of the company, Margot? I've forgotten the consultant.
Do I have that written down?
Anyhow, the woman, Kristen, who,
Oh, the same one as that's doing the village.
yeah, well, it turns out she was actually with the DOT when the new high school was built, the new high school in 1999.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she has that historical context, and she is the one who is like saying, "Are you crazy? You don't have a sidewalk out there?" So
Who is she? Who is this?
it's
who is
it's a woman with the consulting company that is doing the VPI for the bridge in Rock,
Oh,
and
oh,
integral to that is a pathway out to the schools. And it's, from what I understood from Orion, it's not being tossed aside. It is very much integral, even though it's about the bridge, the Goose River Bridge. That
right.
plan is still integral to going out for a pathway out Route 90. So it's gaining traction, and it will gain traction with that whole project and the DOT. So it's still in planning, and it'll be in planning for a while, but it's part of the lexicon now, which is great that we're even saying it's possible. Oh, and then there was also discussion about Marita's house there, because Marita has passed away, and who might get ownership. And if Maine Coast Heritage Trust buys it, and there's some talk that maybe that is happening, then there's more, there's less obstacles to putting a pathway out there. So I don't want to start any rumors, but
That's a great rumor. I'm going to
But-
pass it on Facebook right now.
I
yeah,
will say I'm responsible for following up on that. But the bottom line is, it does seem that if we can do a pathway up that side, it serves the two schools much better than if it needs to be on the other side. It does not address crossing Route 90, which still has to be addressed in a different way, which that's where, we're still trying to figure out how do we do a Route 90 study. And what we did learn is, and this was Orion trying to be faithful, is that we can do another VPI, because in 2000, Route 90 had way fewer cut-ins than currently. And so it's really time to update whether what's happening on Route 90 in terms of traffic and speeds and all that
Yeah,
represents what's currently happening. So I
nice.
think we will be able to push forward with that in the next little bit of time, because it will be great to have a pathway up to Route 90, but we also need some crossways across Route 90.
We were running cross country today, and everyone had to run across, and coach was
And
standing
that's,
out, stopping traffic.
technically illegal, but you're right.
Wasn't, don't say that. then.
Well, I mean, illegal in the sense that, there's not a car in sight, and of course you can cross, but
Right.
by DOT terms, that's not, we're not supposed to be able to have crosswalks there.
so
Hmm.
Orion also discussed, there was a brief discussion about, and because of all the bike paths that are being cut throughout the area. I was out walking on the mountain today, and they are everywhere. At the Snowball, they are everywhere. And now down in the Goose River and coming down, and Orion's has a vision growing for paths throughout the town, that are weaving around and growing that network. And we talked about, what the Pathways mission is, which is connections between the towns and the neighborhoods, and that a path along these highways, Route 1 and Route 90, are still really vital, and even out, maybe someday out to 17 to the Georges River parking lot. But just
And
a,
out to the snowball.
yeah, but those
But you're right, you're
paths-
right, Linda. What we need to do is demonstrate Route 1 and Route 90 as the key arteries that everything else feeds off of.
Yeah.
And part of 17 to get Rockland involved.
And 17, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the momentum is there, but at least we're articulating that, and great. It's wonderful to have the bicyclists, the mountain bikers doing their thing, and then the cross country runners doing their thing. So those are allies, I think, in all of this. Cross country skiers.
But what's
too.
interesting, just as, a middle-aged woman who's commuting to work on her little e-bike from, here to there, it's really interesting to experience Rockport in a way that I'm like, A, why is there a sidewalk here? B, like a 1 foot little fog line, and then it opens up into a 6 foot. Like, there's so many things that are incongruent to safe bicycle commuting. And this is, just, I'm a commuter. I am not.
Margot, you're talking like a commuter. I was just thinking, this lady's talking like a commuter.
I'm a commuter. I'm
There-
commuting.
There was also the discussion about shared streets and how some sidewalks are obsolete. And I know we had the discussion on Central Street in Camden. We had a long discussion about that, but it also came up with Mechanic Street in Rockport, and that sidewalk is, nobody walks on that sidewalk. Everybody. And there was also, brief discussion. Well, maybe we should make Beauchamp Point, just shut it off to vehicular traffic altogether. And so ideas were definitely being floated, and good conversations, I think, to come of it. And there was also mention of that meeting that we had right at the dawn of the pandemic, when we were at Flatbread with all the, coastal mountains, and who else? The bicyclists, and I think we had
DOT was there too.
DOT was there. So I think we need to repeat that again.
I think this winter is going to be prime for another convergence of, and I think we might see a lot more enthusiasm from land trusts and some of the places, if we can get a little bit of sponsorship to think about, making it exciting. But I think this could be a real interesting convergence of, I think we have to include Rockland,
Yeah.
just from the perspective of, Knox County.
Well, they got great ideas.
And they're doing some amazing things. And, think about that as kind of a winter activity.
And I think it's also, if we can keep helping to articulate what the economy is here, and, that it's not strips of, convenience stores on people traveling for healthcare appointments, but it's an outdoor economy. It's it's an educational economy. It's so that we sort of help shape the future of this area. Otherwise, it's going to be cars
Yeah.
down through.
Hey, Linda, just curious, you mentioned Mechanic Street. Did they mention when they're planning to repave that or bury that water line at all? Did that come up?
Yes.
Mechanic Street in Rockport.
Oh, no, I didn't know. The
No,
water
they
line-
did talk about that, because that's kind of, they're looking at the bigger picture, and what I think Mechanic Street, they're trying to figure out. And I think that was actually an ask from us, is that water line, they're going to be dealing with Mechanic Street. The question is, can they get rid of the sidewalk? And so they're looking for some guidance.
It's become incredibly dangerous recently. I mean, with all the whatever they're doing to the road and all the equipment, and it's completely uneven. And there's so many pedestrians that come through there all day long, along with cars. We walk dogs over there. We drive bikes or ride bikes, and we even walk a lady's dog who's 94 years old, and she fell on the rubble and hit her head on the curb.
Oh, is
A
that
couple of-
Ruth?
Yes,
You're walking Charlie?
I am.
Where's
Olivia is.
where's the rubble? Is it on Mechanic Street or on Beauchamp?
Mechanic Street. They've ripped part of the pavement out, and it's just half dirt, half rubble. It's just a complete mess. And she asked me to go by the town office to find out what's happening. And I haven't, well, I called on Monday and they gave me the number to call for the water department, which took me to customer service, which was no help. So I'm just curious. I can stop by the town office tomorrow and ask them what's going on.
Why don't you shoot John an email and just say you're representing Ruth? You're
Okay.
representing Ruth in this case. But that does remind me, we did also talk about the perennial problem of the sidewalk going around towards the Belted Galloways. And John said he really wants to improve that area too. So just as an aside.
Yeah, where the sunflowers grow, which we love them, but there's not, once you go past the sunflowers, it's kind of like danger zone.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a lot of point places like Mechanic Street, do people actually use the sidewalk? Do they not use the sidewalk? And there's probably some data we need to collect. But
Well, I guess if there was one, people would use it. I don't know of a sidewalk unless it's so small that it's, I mean, there's that one on the, like if you're going towards Beauchamp from Russell, there's a very small cracked up sidewalk, but it's barely usable. So if there was a sidewalk, people would use it just to stay out of the way of traffic,
But are we putting money into something that's archaic when we could put the money somewhere else? Like fixing up around the corner. Like if Mechanic Street were becoming a shared street and we created in the Camden Rockport area, this is what we do. These are the expectations for shared streets. And we talked about Wood Street, which Dave had painted in Camden last
or
winter.
Norwood, you mean?
What?
Norwood?
Norwood, yeah, sorry. And did that work? Or, is there a different striping, but that we talk, and this is where this committee comes in,
Right.
that we help establish that language of, symbols and signs for these roads. So maybe we put that on our next agenda, October. That's what, that we really do some research and make recommendations on what that should be. Because I don't think Public Works isn't, Dave's thinking about it, but I don't think Rockport's thinking about that at all. They just want to get the job done.
And I actually think, on my commute, I know there's a section of sidewalk. Get rid of it. Just make the shoulder, make the the breakdown lane bigger. There's no sense to have this piece of sidewalk. And the same is true for Mechanic Street. And I think that's kind of the push, like actually thinking about where could we get rid of sidewalk, because it's not serving a modern purpose, versus if we widen a shoulder, it may actually become a multi-use path that's more effective for.
Then it's just serving for parked cars on Mechanic Street. They're just going to be parking cars along there.
Well, and
Then-
that's actually a very good point. So,
yeah, I
and then
do
you're
worry if they
walking out
widen
the
it,
middle
people
of the
will start
street.
going faster.
so
you
that's
have to-
where that may be where there's no parking, but here's a multi-use path that and part of that may be that it comes to that whole Beauchamp Point, like little gravel area is cut off, or, but these are actually the questions that become part of, I think, at least from Rockport's perspective, and I may be wrong, but this is what they will value for input from us. Like,
Right, but I personally would really caution against saying sidewalks are archaic in any position, in any place, because having the capability of walking off the street versus on the street, it's always better to be off the street. So it's much better, in my opinion, to improve a sidewalk that is off the street than to get rid of the sidewalk, make the street broader so people go faster and they park there, and then you have to walk in the middle of the street in order to get down the street.
yeah, I don't disagree with your analysis. What I'm saying is that we've got to look at each situation and say, Mechanic Street's like a bizarre little example because it's this inward to this, place that 100 people a day check out. And from a town perspective, how do they help support walkers and bikers as well as, I would say that area of any, they want to figure out how to make that work for pathways, which
think-
is really about biking and walking.
So Mark, I think it's a good point. What we need to do is your suggestion is go through the town street by street and decide and look, actually it doesn't have to be street by street, look at the existing sidewalk and talk about it as a committee and say, how do we feel about a sidewalk being there? Is there another solution that serves better in
Yeah.
that situation? And, Public Works isn't going to do anything about that sidewalk until decades because it takes money to pull it out. So they're just thinking when they repave, what do they need to do? Do they need to improve it? Do they need to let it, The other part is we as a committee did a lot of good work when we developed the list of priorities for infrastructure improvement in Rockport. When we put it together for the bond issue that Rockport community voted in favor of, and they gave the pathways $250,000 of that bond money to work on those top 6 sidewalk additions. And we haven't seen any of those. And that was like,
Jeff, this is
5
where
or 6
institutional memory is fabulous because not only does pathways turnover, as towns turnover in terms of.
No, that's great.
boards.
That's great. And I'm not saying, all I'm saying is that for Rockport, this committee has spent already many hours trying to set priorities. And I think if we want to set priorities for the town, when we come to these meetings to say, hey, there's these 6 projects, but this is the number one that we think is number one right now.
Mhm.
We have a document that at least we can start from instead of starting from 0.
And shouldn't that be reflected in our master plans?
It is.
Yeah.
What a good segue.
Okay.
So I think for.
Actually, I don't know if it is for Rockport because I didn't run Rockports, so I don't know.
Well, so we have for our next agenda, which I think is great, to talk about painting and what we could possibly do in these 2 towns for suggesting to Public Works how to mark roads. And then we also can talk about analyzing roads for where the sidewalks don't need to be and how we want to, might want to approach that and or even just have the discussion. Anita?
Linda, we just I had a good discussion about Rockport's annual plan, how it unfolds and what needs to be done when, but we haven't talked about that with Camden. Is that a separate discussion another time? It's the same exact kind of process would happen in Camden, and we need to be aware of that schedule as well.
Yeah, so that's probably where Allison comes in, but what we were talking about was the results of the meeting that we had with Orion and the town
Yes.
manager.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think likewise, but that's a discussion to have probably, with Allison and Audra, to figure out how pathways in Camden can be most effective. The last point, Margot touched on it, was how much do we work independently, the two towns, our subcommittees, and then we convene quarterly. This was an idea. We convene quarterly instead of monthly together, but we really drill down on a specific town. So Camden Pathways Committee does its work, Rockport, and then we meet quarterly as opposed to monthly.
And it's my understanding that the whole point of the master plan is to make it clear to other departments what our priorities are.
Yeah.
And that's
So-
why we've been trying for half a year or more to get that out of committee.
So that's next on the agenda.
But can I just intervene? It's like, we can have, from the Rockport perspective, it seems like we've been this little amorphous or ephemeral kind of desire, and all of a sudden it's realizing that, oh, pathways actually make sense with all the funding that's coming in, which is about climate, the infrastructure money, and all this is coming in, and all of a sudden pathways, and it's not any dissing on anybody, but all of a sudden they're realizing like pathways actually is going to help us get this funding, which it hasn't been like that since I've been a part of pathways. Like all of a sudden we have a little bit of clout where I didn't feel like we had any clout in Rockport. And so there is this, to play this committee, you have to invest in other parts of the infrastructure of your towns. And I get that. I think we've all been very busy, but now we actually have a framework for how the town works for us to engage in Rockport. I don't know, because Linda and I are invested in Rockport. I'm not sure of what that same framework is for Camden. Jeff, you're like, you get it, because you're like, when you've been here, you're Mr. Connective tissue. We've had to rebuild that several times in Rockport because there's been a lot more transition. Where we're at now with the current leadership, we understand their infrastructure. There's a commitment that pathways matters. And now we need to build it and leverage it. And that's kind of like what we're figuring out. And then-
Oops, sorry.
And all I wanted to say is like, there's Rockport work that needs to happen. Do we need to involve the whole Pathways Committee? Is there stuff that has to happen in Camden but there are, what our Rockport people said is, we care about what Camden wants when it's something that's connecting our towns. But if it's, you guys working on a Camden project, we're not as invested. We want to know, like that Route 1, they were very interested in wanting to know about Route 1 connectivity. They're like, we see what Camden did. Okay, we dropped the ball. We're ready to get on board. And so they're very invested, because in their minds, they see where Pathways started was that whole, what is it, Russell Ave or Union or whatever that, the whole multi-use pathway in front of the Y. They think that's where Pathways, what that's all about. So these things that go across towns, that's what we heard from Rockport. And so that's where we started thinking, maybe we only need to meet as a two-town committee for key things.
But to answer Anita's question, Allison had put in chat that they talked about this process as well as at the Camden Select Board meeting last night, and some changes to the budget process itself,
Okay.
and starting earlier and evolving the committees earlier. So maybe both towns are on the same wavelength and not even talking about it, but just, am I reading that right, Allison?
I don't know enough about Rockport's current budget process, but it
No,
sounds.
yes, I think you're reading it right, Linda, that they're working on engaging the committees more earlier on in the budgeting process.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and what they're gonna do, we have a smaller budget committee now, and since the process has been so painful, pretty much always, I guess, for different reasons, they're trying to, they're gonna have all the committees go, I mean, all the budget committee members go around and do tours of all the departments and stuff like that. But then also, and some of that's gonna be optional for the select board, but then they're gonna have the select board try to meet with the budget committee. So that there's more back and forth during the process. And Audra mentioned, she kind of rolled out like this more extensive plan, and she said, I don't want to overwhelm you guys. Some of this will be optional for the select board. There are a few things that we're really going to need you to be there for, though. And they're planning to have at least one meeting earlier on in the process, like way before March, where, and I'll have to go back and see exactly when that is, maybe January, where committees are going to be invited too, so that rather than it getting to the point where the town staff does the budget and then everybody sort of comments and throws rocks at it, trying to know more of those things ahead of time. And so I said that was going to be helpful, because a lot of the time the committees are asking if, should we have our own budget? What are our budget requests going to be? And there's been a lot of confusion because we're trying to get away from having the committees have their own budgets and really trying to get them to follow along with what's going on in the town, so that it gets worked into the department budgets. So anyway, that'll be something that'll be good to be involved in then.
That sounds very congruent with Rockport. Wouldn't you
Mm.
agree, Linda?
Yeah, it sounds like I mean, it's great because it gives us structure too. Weren't we supposed to remind the towns that we wanted to do this, or, look at our master plans? What is it we really want to promote? And we have a schedule for doing that.
When is the joint meeting with the Harbor Committee and Conservation Commission that Michael was mentioning on that last email?
Tonight. That's why I can't be.
Oh, he said he would be at oh, I'm sorry. I thought he said I will be at the joint meeting. I thought there was like a 3 committee meeting coming up. Okay.
No,
Well,
I think that's exactly.
I thought maybe we were meeting with them. I was excited. Don't we meet with them sometimes, Conservation Commission? Maybe
We
once a
had
year?
one meeting. It was really more kind of a share and tell as opposed to priorities, but there was the conversation that there is overlap and that we should build on that. But I think it's figuring out how to figure out each committee's priorities and leverage each other so that we can amplify priorities.
So
Because I
just a
think-
little information, it helps me thinking about it. For a couple of years, I sat in on the Parks and Recreation Committee meeting, every one of them, because the Camden Select Board asked us to work more closely together. And it's really hard. It's as hard as it is for us, it's hard for the committees to synthesize what issues will overlap with another committee. You just got to have to kind of sit there through the committee meetings, and some meetings you don't say anything, and then another meeting you'll say something for 5 minutes, and that's the Pathways influence right there.
Right.
And the message I'm giving you is, if the Harbor Committee or the Conservation Commission or Parks and Rec, if we want to influence these other committees to get them more thoughtful about pathways, one of us has to be at each of their meetings and just sit there and
And
add
I'd
your
say
voice
that-
when it's appropriate.
Yeah, that's where probably Camden, and this may be where it makes sense that like we have kind of the Camden pathways and the Rockport pathways, because I don't think Rockport would have the same clout if the people representing in Rockport are from Camden, just as I'm not sure Camden would have the same.
Oh, I'm not suggesting that, Margot. I'm saying that you or Linda sit there in that meeting, or
Whoever the
Kristen,
full team
you
is,
sit
yeah.
in the Harbor
Oh,
Committee meeting.
hell no.
I'm just saying, what I'm raising the flag about
I
is
know what you're
is
saying.
more time and energy from each of us. Be aware that that's what you're saying is in terms of influencing the other committees and becoming more
Well,
aware.
Richard is our representative on the Harbor Committee.
Yeah, Richard, we don't have to worry about you.
I
So,
think it's also, I agree with you, Jeff, and it's more communication and just being more aware of
is.
what's going on with the various committees. But I mean, realistically, that is really hard, but I think
it's really hard.
Why
It's
couldn't it be?
communication. It's communication, and it's also heightening pathways in the two, amongst the infrastructure of the two towns. And
Yeah.
that's in particular in Rockport, with the planning board working on land use ordinances. I think that's really important. Maybe not so much in Camden, but right now in Rockport, because some ordinances are, being, instead of having an ordinance review committee, now the planning board is picking up more of the crafting or revising ordinances and stuff like that. So I think it's more energy and time and effort, as you say. But we got to pick and choose what we can do.
That's right.
Where we can spend
That's
it.
right. Exactly. And I know Anita, Margot, a couple times you seem to be advocating for the committee to split up and meet less often as a joint committee. Like meet 4 times a year as a full committee and the rest of the time meet as separate town committees. Is that correct?
Well, I think we're looking at capacity issues of people that are on board and able to, like, I know for me personally, I mean, come June, I will be a graduate, but up until then, the thought of doing, committee meetings beyond this and to actually follow through with things is hard.
Yeah, but if we split up as a committee,
It's not splitting up, it's that we have full committee meetings, not monthly, a little less frequently, because
well, but then theoretically, I will submit that if we're not meeting monthly, then on the other months, the individual committees should be meeting for the same time.
correct,
It doesn't change anything.
right.
No,
It's
it doesn't. It doesn't change anything, but I think the meetings, if we met quarterly, we would be more productive in terms of, this is what we're doing and this is where we need to have cohesion on these crosstown projects.
I'd have to check what our charter is, whether we can do that or not.
I think it's unrealistic to ask of members of the Pathways Committee to sit in on other committees, just in case there's something where we would cross fertilize. Perhaps instead, we could have individuals on the Pathways Committee agree to, particular individuals agree to read over the minutes from that meeting, or even to, while they're doing the dishes, they could watch the recorded meeting and take notes for themselves as to where we need to weigh in, and then weigh in with an email. I think it's asking way too much of volunteers to go to our monthly meetings and then also to go to monthly meetings
I agree with
of all
that.
the other committees, or whatever other committees might, conservation, harbor, parks and rec. That's 3 committees I can think of off the top of my head that might relate. It's just untenable and unrealistic. Sorry.
Yep, I agree with you. I agree. So it's 7:20 now, and we were gonna go and talk about these master plans that we've been talking about for a long time. So do we want to do a quick status report on these individual master plans? I would love to get Rockport's done and submitted to the town, and then have the town manager or Orion say, okay, thank you very much. This is what you come and you present it before the select board, or thank you, here it is, and it becomes a reference point. But that's my opinion. I don't know what you guys feel about what you want to do with the master plan. I feel pretty comfortable with where Rockport's is at this point. And I think the people in Rockport, the 4 of us agreed that it was pretty much set to go. But
Yeah.
how are you feeling? I mean, what are your opinions, guys?
I have 2 questions. I have a question and a comment. Has there been any other change to the Rockport master plan since June?
I don't think so. I'd have to go look to track changes, but I don't.
But on Google Drive, the last one I have, it says June 2007. Sorry, 2023. I don't think this is it, because it's a mess
Where is it messy?
in formatting and stuff. I mean, I'm just looking at the dates and stuff.
Well, it's a PDF. Are you looking at the PDF?
Oh, it's a PDF. I'm not looking at a PDF. Hang on.
If you go into the master plan in the
It's
Rockport.
July
folder-
4th. July 4th. That one. Okay.
Could be.
Ooh, fancy. Got it. I didn't know it was a PDF. I thought it would be. So it's it's 10 pages. Is that what it is? No, 34 pages. Who knows how many?
No,
Okay.
I think we cut it down. So, but whatever that PDF is, that if it does say July 4th, 2023, that's probably it.
Okay, thank you. I'll look at that. I have not looked at it, so I don't know. That was a clarification question, whether there was a later date, and how do we comment on the PDF?
I mean, you can comment. There should be a Word doc in there as well. But
Okay,
I'll tell you what, this is what I'll do. I will find the Word doc and upload it so that you can comment on the Word doc in a folder within the Rockport folder. Okay, so that we don't get mixed up. So it'll say file to comment on or something like that.
yeah, well, Google Docs just allowed me to open your PDF.
Oh, cool. All right, then comment away.
It says it's 7 pages. Is that right?
Probably.
Okay. Good. I haven't done it. I'm just speaking for myself. The second one is, I would strongly advocate that that in both towns, Rockport and Camden, that we don't just submit the pathways master plans as for the record, that we ask for it to be on the agenda and we take 20 or 30 minutes of a select board meeting to review it in front of the select board, so that the message is there and it's a touch, and it sure, they may be gone by the time we start implementing it, but it's airtime, and it's a very important document that a lot of work went into, that the select board and the commit and our community should hear about if they're listening.
Sure, I totally agree. So we'll
Well, I
make. a
thought you were
formal-
saying, I thought you were saying, give it to Orion and see what he says to do with it.
Well, I think in terms of not demanding,
I
But
think we should
opening-
demand. I think we should demand.
all right, I guess it's in the terminology of how we approach it, but I think in either way, it would come before the select board, because I know.
Oh, yay. That would be
In
great.
Rock, in Rockport, I do believe that they are asking the committee chairs to go before the select board with their plan. So I think that that's an assumption.
Oh, good.
But in Camden, it may be a request to Audra. I don't want to.
Kristen, you're looking funny.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to read Allison's comment. Y'all can still see me?
But I think in Camden, it's, we do have this request for that Route 1, that hasn't gone away. And the reason I threw in the person who was killed in a wheelchair is because we have wheelchairs in Camden. And we've been talking about that, and that's the focus of our video. So, I mean, not to change topics altogether, but it's really important that we recognize that people in wheelchairs are getting slammed by cars. So go ahead,
I would
Allison.
like to request, we have a different agenda setting process now that's quite a bit more open or easy to follow than it was. So we even have right now a standing agenda item that is agenda requests. And I was about to last night say, we really need to loop back around on this Elm Street stop and go, all of that stuff. And I stopped myself because I realized that really should be combined with some kind of a pathways presentation. And I want to be more thoughtful about the way I asked for that to be on the agenda. But I feel confident that when pathways when we feel it's appropriate, that I can write an email to Tom and requesting it as an agenda item, and that that'll put it in the cycle. And so far haven't found any resistance to that. And I think that's generally kind of a shared thing that people are caring about. We're getting an uptick in requests from neighborhoods to have like a traffic calming evaluation. So there's a whole process for that. We've gotten like 4 requests from different streets. So
What is that called, Allison? A traffic what?
traffic calming, it's part of our traffic calming policy. So there's a form that neighborhoods, like a street, can fill out, where they are required to get, I believe it's something like 90% of the residents on that street to sign on requesting to the town that a study be done to look into options for traffic calming. And so the idea being that, so we don't get so far down the process and find out that half the neighbors don't agree that there's even a problem. So I think like 4 streets have Lime Rock Street, Belmont, C Street, one other perhaps, have gone through that and now are supposedly they're in the data collection phase. So there's a whole policy around that, and I guess neighborhoods are kind of taking advantage of that. So there does seem to be, that would be another good thing for pathways to maybe
Yeah,
follow.
let's put that on the agenda for October because that's really important. What is the structure in Camden for citizens to raise their concerns about traffic?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to the planning office and Phil Shenley, I think is the main one doing it, but Jeremy and Shenley
Okay.
will, give you the form and that make a great little story. Maybe.
Article. That
Yeah.
makes a great story. Yeah, okay. That's cool. Okay, so that's with Rockport. We've got 2 minutes left before we gotta go to bed. But how does the
Start
Camden
cooking
plan-
dinner.
Yeah, start dinner, yeah. What's going on with the Camden plan at this point?
The Camden plan has been done for 3 or 4 months, except for responding to Tom's request or anybody's request for their personal interest in adding an item to it. And we should develop a process to say, if one of us says, hey, I want to add Cobb Road and put a sidewalk on Cobb Road, can we put that in the master plan? I wouldn't support each of us just being able to say that we should review it as a committee in context of everything else. I'm not a big supporter of putting everything in the master plan of any idea of anything. I don't think it helps the select board or committees get clarification on what's important to us as a committee. I'm not commenting on whether the idea of a pathway through the solid waste is a good idea or not, because I worked really hard for a long time to make that happen. Or the idea of adding a pathway along Outer Mechanic to the Snow Bowl is a good or bad idea, because I think that's a great idea too. But I don't put my ideas into things that I'm writing. I put it because the committee has reviewed it. And so I think the next step for the Camden side of things is for this committee to review those suggestions in context. And I would also say that if anybody else has any more ideas, we need to get them on the table so that this just doesn't go on and on and on and on.
So do you want to do that via email so that we can wind up these plans and then in October hash
I
out?
don't think that's, I don't think that's the way to do this. I think people need to have their voices heard, not an
Yeah, I
email.
guess that's my question is that, so if there's a master plan, how does that get out to the public? How do they have a chance to respond? If it has to be attached to kind of like the larger town piece.
Are we talking about asking for ideas for the master plan to the public at this point?
Not me. No, not me. I'm just talking about our committee.
You're talking about committee members.
Within the committee,
Oh,
not within
so,
the town. I'm sorry, Margot. I'm not saying
okay.
ask the whole town for their ideas, because we have done that in the past, and invariably the ideas are always for in front of the person's house.
Right. And our job as a committee is to do the work and figure this out and
In
present.
the context of everything else.
So,
That's right.
so you're just suggesting within the committee.
Within the committee, because Tom just joined the committee, relatively speaking, and he's bringing up, because he doesn't know the history that we've considered those things in the context of everything else. So I don't
Okay.
know.
Gotcha.
I'm willing to just say, hey, no, we're just going to leave it the way it is. And 10 years from now, we can add it or not.
Well, didn't the master plan, I thought we had a list we have a list in Rockport of this is what we were hoping for. Why not put it on the list?
For the very reason I just said, is that I don't think it helps to have a list, an all-encompassing list of everything that we hope to have happen in the next
So-
10 years.
But
This is only a 5 or 10 year doc. So if adding things distracts the town from our priority, that's not a productive thing. Yeah.
Allison?
So I think that one thing that might be really important, and this is something I completely didn't realize a few years ago when in terms of prioritizing is how much like the existing road plans and infrastructure stuff, how much that impacts whether we can move forward on something or not. So we've got this whole thing going on in Camden where Dave St. Laurent's going to be taking over all of the underground infrastructure, so the sewer stuff too, so that he can plan digging up the roads better, basically. And so the idea is that when you do that, you do it once and you do it right, and that's when you make major like structural improvements to the roads. So it might make sense, and especially so that Public Works feels some ownership before the document's finalized, to say, hey, these are the things that we're looking at. Now, what do you know, like in terms of like 5 or 10 years, knowing what's going to match up with infrastructure improvements already, then we know what things can go, are more likely to be able to happen. So I think that's where there's a disconnect occasionally, because then they don't like to do stuff on roads at different times. Like they're not going to put in a sidewalk if they're not already tearing something up, I think, especially since now Public Works is doing a lot more of it themselves. Like we have the ability to build sidewalks ourselves now.
Right. I totally agree. That's a great idea, Allison. I'm happy to do that with Dave. Linda, will you do that with Mike Young?
No, we're not doing it that way in Rockport, but we're gonna,
Okay.
our liaison is Orion at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll just stick to
Different
that.
worlds.
Yeah, it's a
Got it.
different kind of thing, because now Public Works in Camden they're not contracting out all of it, only some of
Yeah,
it.
that's great, Allison. I'm on that. I think that's a fantastic idea.
But then also that would factor in, I think, to some of Tom's ideas so knowing when the Midco Solid, I'd love to talk to Tom more about that. I strongly agree that it is something that now would be the time to move forward on that, as much because of the Midco Solid Waste dynamic, which happens to also be run by Dave St. Laurent. And as much because of that as anything. And I can just tell you what the dynamic is on the board. We've got Eric Boucher is on the board over at Midco Solid Waste, really into all that kind of stuff. So we have the votes to do things like that. And we have, like, I've already walked that whole trail with Dave before. We've talked about getting a bushwhacker in just to like freshen it up, just to start, remind people it was there before. So I know you're hesitant, Jeff, to put because you put so much work into it and it was such a disappointing and frustrating thing. But I really think that
No, that's okay.
you really did the work before so much, and that now that would just be like, copying and pasting it into documents, and it would actually possibly just fly through, at least getting an easement from Midco Solid Waste. Or anyway, that's the end of my pitch, but
Okay,
happy to connect more on that.
thank you.
Should we put that on the agenda for October as well? That particular project? I mean, if things are, no, you don't want to?
No, I don't think so. The whole point is just to get the master plans out. And
Okay, so,
yeah.
all right, so Jeff, you want to take a look at Rockports, make comments. Let's plan for finally the definitive vote, and October's not very far. Let's hold, hate to do this, but it'll be 3 weeks. Oh, hang on. That'll be the first Wednesday in October. And I do believe we should go back to our regular schedule. So let's do that. And that will be October 4th. So that's not very far away. It's 2 weeks basically, but let's plan to vote on these plans October 4th. Okay.
Yeah,
As committees, and
yes.
and maybe that's all we need to do at that meeting, because it's only in 2 weeks and our lives are busy. And then we'll resume maybe in November with a full agenda concerning painting roads, analyzing roads, and maybe talking about the traffic calming. Does that sound reasonable?
That sounds reasonable. I will say that, for this year, come June, my life is different, but that first week of the month is always crazy for me. So I'll just say, I'm on 3 boards, and for some reason, that first week of the month seems to be when everybody wants to meet. And so it's just a hard time. This was a perfect, the 3rd week worked for me. So I'm
Mm,
just saying, if there's any consideration to making it the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th week of the month for this year, I'm happy. I'm also happy to keep it the first week, but I may
I'm
not.
fine
be
with
able to.
whichever.
Yeah, I think that what drove us last time, Margot, was the availability of conference rooms way back when we did conference meetings in person. So I'm happy to check with Camden, availability of conference rooms on that 3rd week. 3rd Wednesday.
Also Zooming.
Well,
with,
I don't think
Mhm.
I don't think we're meeting in person. I think we have another, isn't it December we meet in person?
No, I mean generally, not, it doesn't mean every month, Linda. It just means, they have regularly scheduled meetings.
Right.
So if there's one scheduled for the 3rd Wednesday of every month, then that's not so good.
So let's go back to this dilemma we're having right now. Do we want to wait a month and meet the 3rd week of October? Margot would rather wait.
Well, let me look
So
right
she's-
now. I've got company coming that week. besides,
Oh, you can't do that, Margot. You can't start doing that to us.
No, I mean, right now, I'm okay with the 4th, but it's just that first Monday, the first Wednesday. I get home at 5:30 and have a meeting at 6, and that's just the way it is. I can do the 4th.
So let's stick to the 4th and just take a vote on these plans and get them done.
Okay.
Richard,
And
do you have?
also Linda, in preparation, let's see I will see what room availability is for other Wednesdays of the month, if you would do that for Rockport.
Well, I don't think
We don't need to do that.
we don't
Okay.
need to do that right now. And we also, if we're going to start meeting quarterly, then that, we got to decide on that schedule as well. And that's a decision of, the town managers. But I think I think if we can get these, if we can feel comfortable approving these master plans, I think we're making a huge step. And then we can get them on the websites. And Anita, I only see your hand. I don't see your
Yeah,
face.
You didn't want your face.
The question is, I guess one thing that we're not sure about is what is the point of view or opinion of other members of the Camden Pathways Committee side regarding the draft that has been put forward, and whether there are any additional comments to be added or melded into that document.
Those plans, we've been talking about this for months, and people have had so much opportunity to weigh in. So, I think we had our point people making the edits, presenting them, and if you want to make an appeal.
No, I'm just wondering, if that's the case, then what is putting off the vote regarding that draft to next month?
Oh, because Jeff wants to look at Rockport's and maybe.
Well, aren't they separate plans? Can't they be voted on separately? I'm not.
Oh,
trying to-
are you saying that Camden's is done and we want to vote right now on
Well,
Camden?
that's my question, is
It's
whether it
set at
is.
45.
Whether it is done, and if not, what needs to be done further before a vote can take place?
The key thing is that Tom made 2 suggestions to add, and Allison made an excellent suggestion to check in with Dave St. Laurent on his priorities for the next 10 years and match those up with this. And that's what I'd like to get in consideration.
Okay, so then those 2 plans. Let's vote October 4th on the 2 plans. It's only 2 weeks.
Okay, sounds good. And then Linda and Margot, you mentioned November being a key time to get things in as far as budget things go. So is that
Yeah.
just, once the master plan is voted on, then does anything else have to be done? Do we meet with them again?
Between now and the spring, probably not.
Okay,
Well,
Well,
no, I'm
except
not-
going through the budget process.
Yeah, I don't, for, in terms of meeting with Orion and seeing.
Yeah, you guys just mentioned
We want to
November
talk,
being,
yeah, we want to talk about striping the roads, painting the roads, and I thought we would, I guess it's November. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks for that reminder. We should talk about that in October because we want to encourage the town to put money in the budget for paint for the roads,
Okay.
right? So October 4th, can we do the plans, approve the plans, do our tactical, what we're going to do next with those plans and not spend a lot of time? And then can we talk about some shared symbolism for the roads that we can at least recommend to the town of Rockport to put into the budget to stripe its roads so that, you know, maybe even Park Street could get in there.
sounds good.
Yeah.
I
So
don't
that-
like it. I don't like us messing around with standardizing national logos for signage. I think that exists and all we have to do is get the town to do it.
Right, but what I'm saying is, let's find what we want to recommend that crosses over between Rockport and Camden so that the people of Rockport and Camden have a similar road patterns, similar.
So are you saying, let's choose a road, say Mechanic Street, and put Sharrows on it?
No, I'm just saying,
No.
what symbols are we using that we recommend for what do we recommend for?
It's the same ones the BCM does and then and MDOT.
Okay, but we don't know that, and the towns don't know that. So let's talk
Okay.
about that October 4th, and then we have
Okay.
something concrete. And
I
I
would
don't
put
care.
I would put that towards the bottom of the agenda and get and try to work more on the master plan approval.
Yeah, no, I agree. But if we want to, if we want to recommend to Rockport to start paying attention to its roads and painting for pedestrians or bicyclists now, we got to get that.
Has to be in by November.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, that was a recommendation that came from like Orion and John were really clear that they want to work with Camden, but we need common understanding. And so like, we know that Camden did these Sharrows. Did they do what they wanted to do? Is that what we should keep doing in Rockport? So they're looking for our recommendation to say, yes, this bicycle Sharrow on shared roads works. And then
Yeah.
Rockport would do it. We're not at that point. So we need to have that conversation about, you know, and maybe Bicycle Coalition of Maine needs to be a part of this conversation before we even go out. But we know that come November 1st, if we're not kind of in there, we might have a little bit of wiggle room late in November, but you know, that's our budget time to be in the works for next year for paint or whatever their thinking is. And so this is about that common, like how do we build that commonness by just having common icons and common language. And so
It's fine. Let's talk about it there. We can discuss it.
Yeah. Let's find the commonality.
Right.
All right, good, excellent. So we're all good? See you in 2
Okay.
weeks, right? And when are you
Bye,
guys, when are you guys coming back to the mainland? To the motherland
25th, the 25th.
of October?
Yeah. So one more meeting, Linda.
Jesus, okay. Pack, get your
Enjoy.
suitcase packed. Okay, safe travels.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.